I never thought I'd end up living alone. It wasn't the plan. But after my last relationship ended, I figured some space would do me good. So, when I found a small rental house just outside Pittsburgh, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, I signed the lease without thinking twice. It was an old house built sometime in the 70s with creaky floors and outdated wallpaper, but the rent was cheap and I didn't mind a little solitude. I worked from home as a software developer, which meant I barely had to leave. A quick run to the grocery store once a week, maybe a coffee run every now and then, but that was it. My routine was simple: wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. Some nights, I'd throw on a movie just to have some background noise. Silence had a way of feeling heavier at night. The first few weeks were uneventful, a little too cold at night, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then winter set in hard. The days felt shorter, the nights stretched longer, and the house, despite the heating, felt colder. It started with small things: a creak in the hallway when I was in bed, like footsteps shifting weight, the faint sound of something brushing against the walls. I told myself it was just an old house settling, the wind outside, maybe even a rat in the attic. But by the second week, I started to notice patterns. The sounds always came after midnight, always from the hallway or kitchen. And the worst part? They got closer every night. I remember the first time I really felt something was off. It was around 2 a.m., and I was dozing off when I heard it, clear as day, a soft whisper right outside my bedroom door. I sat up so fast my chest tightened. My first instinct was to grab my phone, but my hands were shaking. I forced myself to listen, to convince myself it was just my imagination. But then, tap, tap, tap. Something knocked on my door. I didn't move. I barely even breathed. My door was locked, thank God. But that didn't stop the fear from creeping up my spine. After a few seconds of dead silence, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, walking away from my door. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I checked everything, the locks, the windows. Nothing was out of place. I even checked the security app on my phone. No alerts, no motion detected. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I had imagined it. I was dead wrong. Friday night was when it got worse. I was in the living room, half watching TV, when I heard something fall in the kitchen, a loud thud. My heart jumped into my throat. I grabbed the closest thing I could use as a weapon, a fireplace poker, and slowly stepped toward the kitchen. Everything looked normal at first. Then, I saw it. The knife I had left in the drying rack was on the floor. Not just fallen, placed upright, tip buried into the wood. A chill ran down my spine. Something wasn't right. I put the knife back, double-checked the doors, and tried to shake off the feeling of being watched. But as I turned to leave the kitchen, I swear I saw something move in my peripheral vision, a shadow shifting in the reflection of the microwave door. That night, I barricaded my bedroom door. By Saturday, I had convinced myself I was losing it. Lack of sleep, stress. Maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me. I even called my friend Josh, half joking about how my house was haunted. He laughed and told me to get a dog. That night, I woke up to footsteps inside my room. Not outside, inside. I couldn't move. I felt frozen in place, my body locked in fear. The sound was faint, like bare feet on hardwood, a slow, dragging step. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. Then the footsteps stopped. Right next to my bed. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the blanket like a lifeline. My breathing was ragged, my mind screaming at me to move, to run, to do something. But I couldn't, and then a whisper. So close to my ear it sent a shiver through my whole body. Not yet. I don't remember what happened after that. 1 second I was stiff with fear, the next thing I knew it was morning and I was waking up drenched in sweat. I barely had time to process before I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The closet door was open. I never left my closet open. That Sunday, I bought security cameras. I didn't care if it was paranoia. I installed them in the hallway, the living room, and one facing my bedroom door. That night I watched the feed on my laptop, telling myself I wouldn't see anything. At 2:37 a.m., I did. The hallway camera picked up movement. A shadow, tall, thin, gliding across the screen. But the moment it reached the stairs, the camera glitched. Static filled the screen, distorting everything for a solid 10 seconds before cutting back to normal. When the feed returned, the shadow was gone. Then the second camera beeped. The one in the living room. I switched feeds, my stomach churning. There it was. Standing dead center in the living room, staring directly at the camera. A figure, dark, almost human, but its limbs were too long. Its head tilted unnaturally to the side. It stood motionless, like it was watching me. Then, the camera cut to black. Before I could react, a sound made my blood run cold. Tap, 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 a knock. Not at the front door, not at the windows. At my bedroom door. I slammed my laptop shut and grabbed the bat beside my bed. My chest was tight, my breathing uneven. I forced myself to listen. The knocking was slow, steady, almost playful. I was done. I wasn't going to wait and see what happened next. I bolted out of bed, yanked open the door, and swung blindly. The bat hit nothing but air. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, I felt it. Something was behind me. I turned. Too late. An invisible force grabbed me and flung me across the room. My back hit the floor so hard I saw white. Before I could move, something grabbed my legs, dragging me. I kicked, twisted, but the grip was inhuman. I caught a glimpse of the figures standing at the end of the hallway. Tall, dark, watching. I don't remember how I got out. I just remember running out the front door into the freezing night, not stopping until I was in my car speeding away. I never went back. The landlord was pissed, but I didn't care. I paid to break the lease, took only what I needed, and moved. Months later, I checked online. The house is still listed. The rent dropped even lower. No one stays for long. And sometimes I still wake up at night, hearing knocks on my bedroom door. But I don't live alone anymore, and neither do they. I was exhausted. After working a long shift and dealing with my usual stack of adult responsibilities, all I wanted was one thing: peace. My name's Mia, and I'm 24. I had just moved into a rental house with 3 former college friends, Rachel, Jenna, and Lena. But honestly, I was already regretting it. Living together sounded fun at first, but within a few months, the little fights over dishes, laundry, and who used up the last of the Wi-Fi bandwidth turned into full-on war. At first, I tried to keep the peace, but lately I could feel the tension thick in the air. And most of it came from Rachel. Rachel had a sharp tongue, a short temper, and an ego that didn't fit in our house. She found a way to criticize everything I did, whether it was how I folded the dish towels or how I hogged the shower, even though she took the longest showers out of all of us. At first, I thought she was just bossy. But over time, I realized it was more than that. She didn't just dislike me. She wanted me gone. It all came to a head when the girls planned a weekend trip to Miami. They were excited, booking flights, choosing outfits, making an itinerary. I tried to be part of it, but Rachel's passive-aggressive comments made it clear I wasn't welcome. "You sure you can afford it, Mia?" she'd say with a smirk. "Wouldn't want you to be stuck eating dollar menu meals while we're dining on the beach." It was subtle, but the message was loud and clear. So, a week before the trip, I told them I wasn't going. Jenna and Lena tried to convince me otherwise, but Rachel? She just grinned like she had won some kind of game. Friday night came, and they left. And honestly, I was relieved. Finally, I had the house to myself. No fights, no dirty looks, no Rachel. I grabbed a blanket, microwaved some popcorn, and settled onto the couch to binge-watch old episodes of Friends. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm, until the knock at the door. It was loud, sharp, aggressive. My stomach clenched. It was almost 11 p.m. Who the hell was knocking this late? I grabbed my phone and crept to the peephole. It was Nate, Rachel's boyfriend. I didn't like Nate. He was arrogant, always talking over people, always trying to prove he was the smartest guy in the room. He had that kind of cocky grin that made you feel like he knew something you didn't. So why was he here? I cracked the door open, keeping the chain locked. What do you want? Rachel's not here. I know, he said smoothly. That's why I came. My gut twisted. What? He leaned closer. You know, you're really beautiful, Mia. I blinked, my brain short-circuiting. Was this guy serious? I let out a dry laugh. Yeah, okay, go home, Nate. But he didn't move. I'm serious. Rachel doesn't appreciate you, but I do. We could have some fun. I felt like I was going to be sick. This was Rachel's boyfriend, and he was standing here trying to cheat on her. With me? Not interested. I went to slam the door. That's when he said it. You sure about that? Then, he pulled out his phone, held it up to the peephole, and my heart stopped. It was a picture of me, naked. At first, I thought I was seeing things. My brain refused to process it. But then my vision cleared and I saw the details, the angle, the background. This was my room, my bed. I felt a cold sweat creep up my spine. Where the hell did you get that? I snapped. Nate just smirked. Michael sent them to me. Michael, my ex-boyfriend. We had broken up 6 months ago and I already knew he was trash. But this? I had never sent him photos like that, which meant he took them without my consent. I felt my hands shaking. What do you want? His grin widened. It's simple. Let me in, and I'll keep these between us. But if you don't, he tilted his phone. I'll send them to Rachel, to your roommates, to everyone. I froze. It didn't matter that I had done nothing wrong. People believe what they want to believe. And Rachel? She already hated me. She'd never listened to my side. Either I gave in, or he destroyed me. I looked him dead in the eye. Then I swung the door open and punched him right in the face. His phone flew out of his hand. He stumbled back, clutching his nose. You bitch. I slammed the door shut. Locked it. Deadbolt. Chain. Everything. Then shaking, I grabbed my phone. I was about to call my sister when my screen lit up. Group chat. Miami girls. My stomach dropped. Rachel. You disgusting slut. Jenna. Mia. What the hell? Lena. How could you do this? He did it. Nate had sent the pictures. My hands trembled as I scrolled through their messages. They were calling me every name in the book, telling me to pack my bags, saying they were sending the photos to my parents. I tried to type, tried to explain, but Rachel was already on a warpath. Rachel. Don't even try to lie. Nate told me everything. You threw yourself at him. I felt like I was drowning. Then, an idea hit me. I knew where Nate lived, and if I played this right, I could make him confess. Fueled by rage and adrenaline, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to his apartment. When he opened the door, I forced a smile. I've been thinking, I said, fidgeting with my necklace. Maybe you were right. His eyebrows lifted. Oh? I stepped closer. Everyone already thinks I did it, so why not? His grin was disgusting. That's what I like to hear. But first, I purred, I have to know. Why? He hesitated. Why what? Why send the photos? I tilted my head. Why ruin me? At first he played dumb, but I kept pressing, flirting, acting interested. And finally he cracked. He admitted everything. Michael had never sent him the photos. Rachel did. She had given them to him, planned the whole thing. She wanted me out of the house, out of their lives, humiliated. I hit record on my phone. The moment I got home, I sent the recording to the group chat, then to Rachel's parents, her boss, every mutual friend we had. Rachel's world collapsed. Her parents cut her off. Her boss fired her. Jenna and Lena kicked her out. She was stranded in Miami with nowhere to go. She tried to call me, begged, apologized. I never answered, because I wasn't afraid of her anymore. People say revenge isn't the answer. Maybe they're right. But I'll tell you this, Rachel never messed with me again. My name is Daniel. I'm 18, just out of high school and waiting for my college acceptance results. Normally, that's all I'd be thinking about, my future, my plans. But recently, something else has taken over my mind. Something so disturbing that I don't know if I'll ever truly move forward. I live with my dad, Mark. It's been just the two of us since I was 6, ever since my mom disappeared. The official story? She left us. She found someone else, Danny. Dad told me when I was old enough to ask. One day she packed her bags and left. No warning, no goodbye. Just a phone call telling me she wasn't coming back. At first I believed it. Why wouldn't I? I was just a kid. But as I got older, certain things didn't sit right. Didn't she ever try to contact me? I asked once. Dad shook his head, his face unreadable. Number not once. But why? His expression darkened. Some people don't have it in them to be parents, son. I know it's hard, but she made her choice. She moved on, and so did we. That was the end of it. Or at least that's what I thought. This past summer, Dad decided to take a 2-week vacation with his girlfriend, Lisa. You sure you'll be okay on your own? He asked as he packed. I laughed. Dad, I'm 18, not 12. I'll be fine. He smirked. All right. Just don't burn the house down. And maybe go outside once in a while, huh? Meet some people. Live a little. I'll think about it, I said, even though I knew I'd probably spend most of the time gaming and ordering takeout. The first few days were great. I invited some friends over, drank a little, watched some movies. But after they left, the silence of the house hit me differently. It wasn't eerie, just empty. Then things got weird. It started with a dream. I saw my mother, her face clearer than I had ever remembered, screaming. A shadow loomed over her, and before I could do anything, she was gone. Not like she had disappeared, more like she had been erased. I woke up in a cold sweat. My heart was hammering. I shook it off. Just a nightmare, I told myself. Maybe my subconscious was digging up old feelings. I mean, it made sense. I'd been alone in this house for a week, left with nothing but my thoughts. But the next morning, I found something that made my blood run cold. Scattered across the living room floor were old photographs. My mother's photographs. Some with me as a baby, others just of her. I hadn't seen them in years. Hell, I didn't even know we still had them. I stood frozen, my pulse pounding in my ears. Did Dad leave these out before he left? Number that wouldn't make any sense. I checked the locks. Everything was secure. No sign of a break-in. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe the photos had always been there, tucked away somewhere, and I had forgotten. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. That night, I had another dream. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Look in the attic, Danny. I jolted awake, gasping. My room was dark, but the unease from the dream clung to me like a second skin. I wasn't superstitious. I didn't believe in ghosts or messages from beyond. But something in me, some deep, instinctive fear, told me to listen. The attic had always been off limits. Not officially, but it was one of those places neither of us ever had a reason to go. The air was thick with dust as I climbed up. Boxes upon boxes of old junk surrounded me. My flashlight flickered as I swept it around. Nothing seemed out of place. But then I saw it. An old wooden cabinet shoved into the farthest corner. Something about it felt off. I opened it. Inside were old papers, some of Dad's old books. Nothing unusual. But as I reached to close it, my fingers brushed against the back panel. It felt hollow. My stomach twisted. I hesitated for only a second before gripping the edges and pulling. The wooden panel groaned before giving way. Behind it was a wall. a wall that looked hastily patched up. My breath hitched. This wasn't normal. I found a crowbar among the junk and wedged it into the weak plaster. It crumbled easily, revealing something that made me recoil in horror. A skeleton, dressed in faded, rotting clothes, a green dress with white stripes. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. I knew that dress. I had seen it in one of those photos. My mother. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But it was. The police arrived within the hour. They examined the remains, took samples, asked me endless questions. The DNA results confirmed what I already knew. It was my mother, and there was only one person who could have done this. When Dad returned from his trip, I was waiting for him. He barely had time to put his suitcase down before I spoke. "Dad," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I found her." He froze. For a second, just a second, I saw something in his eyes. Not confusion, not disbelief. Fear. Then he sighed, rubbed his temples, sat down on the couch like all the energy had drained from his body. "You weren't supposed to know," he murmured. My stomach twisted. "You did this," I choked out. "You killed her." He didn't deny it. Instead, he looked at me, really looked at me. "She was going to take you," he said. "She was leaving me and she was taking you with her. I couldn't let that happen." Tears burned my eyes. "So you murdered her?" "I didn't plan to," he said, almost desperate. "It was a fight. She threatened to leave," I snapped, and before I knew it, she was gone. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. "Stop," I cut him off, my voice shaking. "Just stop." I called the police. He didn't fight, didn't beg. As they took him away, he only said one thing. "I love you, Danny. No matter what happens, I love you." I didn't respond, because I didn't know if I still loved him back. Dad's in prison now. I visit him sometimes. Not because I forgive him, I don't think I ever will, but because part of me still clings to the father I once knew. But the truth? I don't know if that man ever really existed, and that haunts me more than anything. I still remember that summer like it was yesterday. The heat would rise early, making the whole neighborhood feel slow and sleepy. Our town, a small, quiet place in Indiana, wasn't the kind of place where people locked their doors in the daytime. Nothing ever really happened there, or at least nothing bad. I was 12 that summer, old enough to stay home alone while my parents worked. My dad was a contractor, always up before the sun, and my mom worked at a local diner, pulling long shifts. My older brother Josh had gone to his friend's place that day, which left me alone in the house. Normally, I didn't mind it. I'd sleep in late, make myself some cereal, and spend hours on the old family computer in the living room playing Minecraft or watching random YouTube videos. It was sometime in the afternoon when I got up from my chair, stretching after being on the computer for who knows how long. I decided to grab something from the kitchen. The house we lived in was a split level, meaning if you stood at the front door, you could either go up to the main floor or down to the basement. The kitchen was at the back of the house, with a big window above the sink that overlooked the backyard. I was halfway to the fridge when I saw something move outside. At first, it was just a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision. I turned my head and saw a man walking through our backyard. He was wearing a construction vest and a baseball cap, moving slowly toward the back of the house. My stomach tightened. Then, I remembered. The meter reader. They came around once in a while to check the gas meter, which was right outside the basement window. My dad had told me before not to worry if I ever saw someone back there. I exhaled, shaking my head at myself for getting worked up. Still, something about the guy felt off. He wasn't carrying a clipboard or anything, just walking real slow like he was trying not to make noise. I watched as he stopped by the basement window. Normally, the meter readers would just take a quick glance, write something down, and be on their way. But this guy didn't move. He just stood there. I frowned, grabbing a bag of chips from the counter but keeping my eyes on him. A minute passed, then another. He was still there. That's when the uneasy feeling in my stomach started turning into something worse. I backed away from the window, trying to stay out of sight. Maybe he was just double-checking something? Maybe he was on the phone? I wanted to believe that. But another part of me, an instinct I didn't quite understand at the time, told me to stay quiet. I moved carefully toward another window in the house, one that gave me a better angle to see what he was doing. My breath caught in my throat. He wasn't looking at the meter. He was looking into the basement window. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. I thought about going downstairs to get a closer look, but something told me that if he saw me, it would change everything. So I stayed put, peeking carefully from behind the curtain. Then I made a mistake. As I stepped back, my elbow knocked over an empty soda can on the counter. It hit the floor with a loud clatter, and the sound might as well have been a gunshot in the silence of the house. The man's head snapped up. For a split second, we locked eyes. Then he moved. Fast. I barely had time to react before he was speed walking, out of the backyard. I ran to the front of the house and peered through the curtains, my heart slamming against my ribs. He wasn't running, but he was moving quickly, heading down the street like nothing had happened. I stood there, frozen. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do. Eventually, I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid, that maybe he was just the meter reader, and I had overreacted. By the time my parents and Josh got home later that evening, I didn't even think to tell them about it. I wish I had, because that night, he came back. It was past midnight when I finally decided to go to bed. Josh had gone downstairs to his room hours ago, and my parents had been asleep even longer. The only light in the house was the soft glow from the living room lamp, but as I turned it off, I hesitated. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me still felt uneasy from earlier. Shaking it off, I made my way downstairs. The basement had a small living area that you had to walk through to get to the bedrooms. It was dark, so dark that I could only see vague shapes of the furniture. I reached for the light switch when I saw it. A figure at the window. My stomach dropped. He was standing in the same spot he had been earlier, but this time I could see his hands moving, trying to open the window. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then, as if my body acted on its own, I slammed my hand against the light switch. The basement flooded with light. The figure outside jerked back. For half a second, he was perfectly still. Then, he turned and ran. The moment he disappeared, my legs unlocked and I bolted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. My hands fumbled with my parents' door, banging on it as I gasped for air. My dad yanked it open, half asleep and confused. What? There was a man at the basement window, I blurted out. My voice was shaking. He was trying to get in. He was trying to get in. My dad was awake in an instant. He grabbed the baseball bat from behind the door and stormed downstairs. My mom was right behind him, her face pale. By the time he checked outside, the man was long gone. But he had left something behind. The basement window had been pried almost completely out of the frame. The only reason he hadn't gotten in was because of the old rusted nails still barely holding it in place. The police were called, but there wasn't much they could do. There were no cameras, no witnesses, just a vague description of a man in a construction vest. But he never came back after that night. For weeks, I barely slept. I moved upstairs to the couch, too afraid to be in the basement alone. Every creak of the house made my stomach twist. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't knocked that can over earlier that day, if I hadn't turned on the light that night. But I do know this. He wasn't there to check the meter. It had been 8 years since Daniel moved into his house, a modest 4-bedroom place that once felt full of life when he had roommates. But now, it was just him. He only used his bedroom, and a second room he'd turned into a gaming setup. The other 2 rooms, one for storage and one completely empty, sat at the far end of the upstairs hallway, rarely touched. That night, Daniel finished his late shift at work and grabbed some takeout before heading home. It was a Friday, and with no work the next day, he planned to spend the night gaming. After tossing his bag onto the couch, he went straight to the game room, booted up his PC, and put on his headset. Barely a few minutes into his first match, he heard it. A faint knock or maybe the sound of a door closing. He paused, slipping off his headset to listen. Silence. Figuring if it were someone at the door, they'd knock again. He brushed it off and got back to playing. Hours passed, the game fully absorbing his attention until the sound came again. This time it was clearer. Something shifting, a dull thud from elsewhere in the house. He removed his headset, heart pounding slightly as he turned to look at his open door. The hallway beyond was dim, empty. Cautiously, Daniel stood, stepping into the hallway. He listened, straining to pick up any further movement. Nothing. Just his mind playing tricks on him, he decided. Still, for peace of mind, he went downstairs, checked the locks, and confirmed everything was secure. Satisfied, he returned to his game room, but left the door open this time. 20 minutes later, just as he leaned back in his chair after a match, something moved past the open doorway. A shadow. A figure. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as every hair on his body stood on end. He spun in his chair, heart hammering, staring into the hallway where the movement had been. Empty. But he knew what he saw. Someone, something, had been there. For several minutes he couldn't move, barely breathed. Then, forcing himself to act, he grabbed the nearest heavy object, a desk lamp, and crept out into the hallway. His pulse pounded in his ears as he checked each room, one by one. When he reached the empty storage room, he hesitated before slowly pushing the door open. The light switch clicked on. The room was barren, but the closet door, which had been open last time he checked, was now shut. Daniel's fingers tightened around the lamp as he reached for the handle. Over the next few days, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At first he tried to rationalize it. Maybe stress, maybe lack of sleep. But then the small things started happening. Items in his kitchen moved. Doors he swore he had closed were open, and sometimes in the dead of night, he would wake up to the sound of something shifting in the walls. The house, once his safe space, now felt like a trap. He found himself avoiding the empty rooms entirely, shutting their doors tight and pretending they weren't there. But the noises persisted. And then came the night when he saw it again. A figure standing in the hallway, just at the edge of his vision. It was tall, thin, unmoving. Daniel barely had time to react before it slipped into one of the empty rooms. This time he didn't hesitate. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and followed. As he stepped inside, the air grew colder. The room smelled stale, like damp wood and dust. His flashlight flickered and then, a whisper, right behind him. Daniel whirled around, but there was nothing. The closet door stood slightly ajar. Trembling, he reached for it, yanking it open in one swift motion. The space inside was empty save for something small on the floor, a piece of paper, yellowed with age. He picked it up, unfolding it with unsteady hands. "I see you." His breath caught. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. The sound of something scraping against the wall made him turn, but again, nothing was there. That night he barely slept. Every creak, every shift in the house had him on edge. And then, just as he started to drift off, his bedroom door creaked open. Someone was inside. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and exhaustion. Daniel installed locks on every door, triple-checked the windows, even set up makeshift alarms. But no matter what he did, the feeling of being watched never left him. And then, one night, it all escalated. Daniel woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. A loud bang echoed through the house. His mind raced. Was it real? Or had he imagined it in his half-sleeping state? Then came the slow, deliberate sound of footsteps moving down the hall. Daniel reached for his phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, but he barely heard it over the blood pounding in his ears. "There's someone in my house," he whispered. "Stay where you are. Officers are on their way. Can you see them?" He wanted to look, but was too afraid to move. The footsteps stopped right outside his door. His heart pounded as he listened, breath held, waiting. The knob turned. He threw himself against the door, holding it shut with his full weight. The person on the other side pushed back hard. Daniel screamed into the phone. "He's trying to get in." The sound of sirens cut through the silence. A moment later, the pressure on the door vanished. When the police arrived, they found the front door wide open, but no one was inside. They searched the entire house top to bottom. In the empty room, they found a sleeping bag, food wrappers, and a journal. Flipping through its pages, one officer frowned. "Looks like someone was living here for a while." Daniel took the journal with trembling hands and skimmed through the scrawled notes. The last entry sent chills down his spine. "He doesn't know I watch him sleep." Daniel moved out within the week. He couldn't stay in that house, not knowing how long someone had been there, watching him, living alongside him without his knowledge. The new owners renovated the place, but Daniel never looked back. To this day, he double-checks every closet, every empty space, everywhere he lives. Because now he knows. Sometimes you're never truly alone. The first thing Noah noticed when he woke up was the silence. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, pressing down on him like an invisible weight. He lay there for a moment, his mind sluggish from sleep, before he turned to check his phone. 2:13 a.m. The blue glow of the screen illuminated his bedroom, casting long shadows against the walls. His heart was pounding, and he had no idea why. He sat up, rubbing his face. Maybe he had a nightmare? He couldn't remember dreaming about anything, but the uneasy feeling in his chest remained. As he sat there trying to shake the sleep from his mind, he heard something, a soft click from downstairs. His stomach tightened. Noah lived alone in his townhouse. His friends would crash there sometimes, especially Sarah and Chris, who always needed a break from their parents' places. But no one was supposed to be here tonight. He had no plans until tomorrow, and he was sure he had locked the door before going to bed. He strained his ears, holding his breath. The sound came again, a faint creak, like a door being pushed open slowly. He felt his skin prickle. "It's nothing," he told himself. The house settling, or maybe the wind. But then he heard the footsteps. Slow, measured, coming from the living room. A chill crawled up his spine. He slid out of bed as quietly as he could, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might give him away. His bedroom door was slightly ajar, leaving just enough of a gap for him to peek out into the hallway. The house was dark, but there was a faint glow coming from downstairs. The TV? Noah frowned. He didn't leave it on. He was sure of it. Swallowing hard, he forced himself to step out into the hall. His breath felt loud in the quiet as he crept toward the stairs. Each step he took felt like a gamble. When he reached the top of the staircase, he froze. There was someone sitting on his couch. The glow of the television flickered across the figure. A man, maybe in his 50s, with long, greasy hair and tattered clothes. His posture was relaxed, one arm draped over the back of the couch as if he belonged there. He was staring at the screen, but as if sensing Noah's presence, he turned his head slightly and smiled. It was the kind of smile that sent a jolt of fear straight to Noah's gut. Slow, deliberate, wrong. Then the man lifted his hand and waved. Noah bolted. He didn't think, didn't pause, just turned and sprinted down the hallway, taking the stairs two at a time. The man didn't move, didn't speak. The only sound was the rush of his own heartbeat in his ears. He crashed through the front door, bare feet hitting the cold pavement as he ran across the street. He pounded on his neighbor's door, breathless, shaking. Mrs. Patel answered, startled and confused. "Noah?" "Call the police," he gasped. "There's someone in my house." She hesitated for only a second before yanking him inside and locking the door behind him. As she grabbed her phone, Noah turned to look back at his house. The lights in the living room were off. By the time the police arrived, the man was gone. No signs of forced entry, nothing stolen, nothing out of place except for the fact that Noah knew he had seen someone. But with no evidence, the officers dismissed it. Probably just a homeless man looking for a place to sleep, one of them said. Noah wanted to believe that, but he couldn't shake the feeling that whoever that man was, he hadn't just been looking for shelter. He had been waiting. Noah spent the rest of the night on Mrs. Patel's couch, unable to sleep. His mind kept replaying the image of that man on his couch, the way he had smiled, the slow, deliberate wave. Something about it felt off, too calm, too calculated. The next morning, after the police had officially closed the case with no further investigation, Noah hesitated before stepping back into his townhouse. He stood at the threshold staring at the couch where the man had been sitting just hours ago. It looked normal now, like nothing had happened. But he couldn't shake the feeling that it had. He checked the locks, the front door, the windows, even the back patio. Everything was secure. There was no logical way for someone to have broken in without leaving a trace. That was the part that unnerved him the most. Over the next few days, he tried to convince himself it was over, that it had been a one-time thing. Maybe the police were right. Maybe it was just a homeless man who wandered in, found a comfortable spot, and left when he realized he'd been seen. But the feeling of being watched never left him. At night, he kept his bedroom door locked. He started sleeping with his phone under his pillow just in case. Every little sound made his breath hitch, his pulse race. Then, a week later, it happened again. It was 3:27 a.m. when he woke up this time. The silence was suffocating, pressing in around him. His heart was already pounding before he even opened his eyes, as if his body knew something was wrong before his mind did. Then he heard it. The click of the front door unlocking. His breath caught in his throat. He shot upright, grabbing his phone and dialing 911 before he even had time to process what was happening. The footsteps started again, slow, measured, coming from the living room. He held his breath as he heard the TV switch on downstairs. Then a low, raspy voice called up the stairs. "Noah, you left the door unlocked for me this time." Noah's blood ran cold. He didn't wait this time. He grabbed the baseball bat from beside his bed, his fingers tightening around the handle. He wasn't going to run. Not again. He moved toward the hallway, forcing his breathing to steady. His heart pounded so loud he thought it might drown out the sound of the intruder's footsteps. He crept to the top of the stairs and looked down. The man was there, sitting on the couch, smiling. But this time he wasn't alone. A second figure stood in the hallway, barely visible in the dim glow of the television, watching him. Noah took a step back, his pulse roaring in his ears, his grip tightened on the bat. Then the lights in the house flickered, and everything went dark. When the police arrived minutes later, the front door was wide open. They found Noah standing in the middle of his living room, his bat still clenched in his shaking hands. His face was pale, eyes wide and unfocused. The house was empty. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. Just the television still playing static. And the front door, unlocked. It had been one of those quiet nights again. My roommate Derek was out partying like usual and I had the house to myself. I didn't mind. I actually liked having the place to myself sometimes. The night was cool and the streets were quiet, so I decided to grab a couple of beers and relax on the front porch. The old wooden swing we had out there creaked softly as I rocked back and forth, enjoying the peaceful night. It was close to midnight when I noticed someone walking down the street. At first, I didn't think much of it, just some guy taking a late-night stroll. But as he got closer, something about the way he moved made me uneasy. His body was rigid, his arms hanging stiffly at his sides, while only his legs seemed to be doing the work. He wore a dark hoodie with the hood up, his face barely visible in the dim streetlights. When he reached the part of the road directly in front of my house, he stopped. He turned his head toward me, just standing there in the middle of the road watching. I shifted uncomfortably, gripping the can of beer in my hand. "Hey, buddy, you need something?" I called out. No response. He just stood there. I waited another few seconds, expecting him to move along, but instead he turned and started walking up my driveway. My stomach dropped. I stood up from the swing, my pulse quickening. "Hey man, this is private property. You need to leave." Still no response. His slow, deliberate steps continued. I backed up toward the front door, my hand instinctively going to the doorknob. "I said, get the hell out of here," I shouted, my voice more aggressive now. But he kept coming. Panic surged through me and I yanked the door open, slipping inside and slamming it shut behind me. I locked it quickly and pressed my back against it, my breath coming fast. A few seconds later, I heard a dull thud against the door. He had reached it. I rushed to the peephole and peered through. He was right there, standing motionless on my porch, his head slightly tilted like he was listening. Then, he reached under his hoodie and pulled out something. I strained to see what it was in the dim light. A hammer? A crowbar? My blood ran cold. I scrambled away from the door and bolted up the stairs, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone at my house. He just walked up my driveway and now he's trying to break in. He has a weapon. Stay on the line with me. Are your doors locked? Yes, but I think he's about to... A loud crack echoed through the house. Wood splintering. He was breaking the door down. I choked back a curse and ducked into my bedroom, locking the door behind me. My breathing was erratic, my hands sweaty as I clutched my phone tighter. "The front door just broke," I whispered, trying to stay quiet. "Please hurry. We have officers on the way. Stay where you are and don't engage." I pressed my ear to the bedroom door. Silence. Then, slow, deliberate footsteps. He was inside. My entire body froze. The only sound was my own shallow breathing and the faint creak of the floorboards downstairs. Then the footsteps stopped. For a moment, I wondered if he'd left. But then I heard it. The slow, steady creak of the stairs. He was coming up. Terror gripped me like a vice. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. I had no weapon, no way out except the second-story window. I didn't want to move, afraid that even the slightest noise would give me away. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and stopped. Silence again. I held my breath, my ears straining for any sign of movement. Then, a soft knock at my bedroom door. I nearly screamed. My entire body locked up, every muscle tensed. He knew I was in here. He was just waiting. Seconds felt like hours. Then, from outside, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Flashing red and blue lights reflected against my window. The police. I didn't dare move, not until I heard shouting from downstairs, followed by a sudden burst of noise. An officer's voice. Then the crackling sound of a taser being fired. Then silence. I sat there, still frozen in fear, until finally, a voice called from outside my room. "Police, you can come out now." I unlocked the door, my legs nearly giving out as I opened it. 2 officers stood in the hallway, guns drawn. And right outside my door, lying motionless on the floor, was the man. Later, I learned that he had been heavily intoxicated. But beyond that, the police couldn't get much out of him. He wouldn't say who he was, why he was in my neighborhood, or why he'd chosen my house. The officers searched him and found a small notepad in his pocket, filled with incoherent scribbles. Some pages had my address written over and over. My blood ran cold at the realization. This wasn't random. Had he been watching me? Following me? How long had he known where I lived? One officer assured me they'd be taking him in for further questioning, but even after he was gone, I didn't feel safe. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every small sound made my skin crawl. I kept replaying everything in my mind, wondering what would have happened if the police had been just a minute later. Even now, I still check the locks multiple times before bed. I no longer sit outside alone at night, and every time I hear an unfamiliar sound outside, my heart races, fearing that one day he might come back. I was 18 when my parents left for their week-long anniversary trip. My sister had already moved out, leaving me alone in our house, a 2-story home tucked deep in the woods at the end of a dirt driveway. The nearest house was a good 10-minute walk away, and our quiet back road was traveled only by locals. Most people in town knew each other. You'd see the same faces at the grocery store, gas station, and bars, not that I was old enough to go to them yet. It was one of those places where people waved when they passed, where kids played outside unsupervised, and crime was virtually non-existent. Or so I thought. It started on a Friday afternoon. I stopped at a gas station on my way home from running errands. The station was old, with flickering fluorescent lights and a single attendant inside, half asleep behind the counter. As I started pumping gas, a black Jeep Cherokee pulled up to the pump beside me. The vehicle was older, the paint slightly faded. A man stepped out, mid-40s, dark goatee, hollow eyes. He greeted me with a nod, then locked his pump handle and stepped around to my side. "Excuse me, do you know how to get to the interstate from here?" His voice was calm, polite, but something about it made my skin prickle. I hesitated, then gave him quick directions. Instead of listening, he pulled out a notepad, not his phone, and started writing them down. His handwriting was slow, deliberate, as if he were stalling. Odd. He glanced up. "Are you from around here?" I shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, I grew up here." His lips curled into a thin smile. "Nice town. Real quiet." His eyes lingered on me for just a second too long. He thanked me, got back in his car, and drove off as I finished pumping gas. I brushed off the weird feeling and got into my car. Then, as I pulled onto the road, my stomach dropped. The black Jeep was behind me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he just happened to be going the same way. But when I reached my long dirt driveway and turned in, he kept driving past, going the opposite direction of the interstate, the very place he claimed to be looking for. A strange coincidence, but still. A coincidence, right? I shook it off and went inside. That night I had plans to meet some friends. As I stepped outside and walked toward my car, I heard a sound, a rustling in the woods. I paused, listening. The wind? An animal? I kept walking. Then, a voice. "Kate." A man's voice. Low, drawn out, coming from somewhere in the trees. I froze. The neighbors knew my name, sure, but our houses weren't close. Why wouldn't they call out from the road instead of the dark woods? I swallowed my fear and rushed back inside, locking the door behind me. My parents were skeptical when I called, saying it was probably just a neighbor messing around. I didn't tell them about the man at the gas station. The next night, I was leaving again when I heard it a second time. "Kate." This time it was closer and clearer. I didn't hesitate. I bolted inside and locked the door, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. The police arrived 20 minutes later, searched the area with flashlights, and found nothing. "Call again if it happens," they said. I didn't feel any safer. The following night I had to work a late shift at the restaurant. By the time I got home, it was nearly midnight. I pulled into the driveway, parked, and stepped out. The air was cool, the woods eerily silent. Then, a twig snapped. Not an animal, something heavier. I turned my head slowly. A shadow moved between the trees. Then, "Don't call the cops on me again, cutie." A voice, right behind me. I spun around and saw him, the man from the gas station, standing at the edge of the woods, staring at me. My body locked up. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. Then I ran. I fumbled with my keys as I reached the door. The second I was inside, I slammed it shut and locked every bolt. Outside, there was silence. Then, a knock, software deliberate, on the glass of the front window. I didn't look. I backed away, dialing 911 with shaking hands. By the time the cops arrived, he was gone. My parents insisted I stay with a friend for the night. I agreed. Before leaving, I peered out the window. The yard was empty. I grabbed my bag, stepped outside, locked the door, and ran to my car. The second I slid into the driver's seat, I felt it. A presence. I turned my head. He was standing right outside my car door, wearing a black ski mask. Before I could react, he yanked the door handle, locked. Then he slammed his elbow into the window, hard enough to crack it. I threw the car into drive, tires spinning on the grass as I looped around the house and tore down the driveway. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing there, watching me leave, smiling. The cops searched the area again. No trace, no prints, nothing. But I knew. He had been watching me, learning my routine. He knew my name, my house, my schedule. He had been toying with me, waiting for the right moment. If I hadn't locked my car door, I might not be here to tell this story. I moved out of my parents' house a few months later. I never saw him again, but sometimes I still hear my name in the dark. I remember that night more vividly than I should. Every sound, every flicker of movement outside the window, every second of my pulse hammering in my ears, it's burned into my memory, like a scar that refuses to fade. I was 15 or 16, home alone for reasons I no longer remember. My parents were gone, maybe for the weekend, maybe just the night. My siblings, if they were even home, weren't part of my world. I was a gamer, locked into my StarCraft obsession, and on that particular night I was deep into a session, the kind where hours blur together and the real world fades away. That's why at first I barely registered the doorbell ringing. Ding dong, ding dong. It was a little past midnight. The sound barely cut through the hum of my PC fans and the rapid clicks of my mouse. I didn't move right away. In fact, I nearly ignored it. Who the hell rings a doorbell at this hour? Then it rang again, twice in quick succession. This time a sharp, uneasy sensation spread through my chest. I wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody I knew would come over this late, not without calling first. Still, I got up, half annoyed, half curious. But as I moved toward the door, something felt wrong. A prickling sensation crept up my spine as I reached the entryway. The porch light was on, but through the frosted glass of the storm door, I could only make out a silhouette. I hesitated, hand hovering over the knob. My parents had always told me, never open the door for strangers. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice steady, despite the unease building inside me. A woman's voice answered, muffled but soft. Too soft. I could barely make out the words. "Please, I need to use a phone." I frowned. A phone? Who asks to use a house phone in 2020? Everyone has a cell phone. Through the distorted glass, I saw her shift slightly. Something about her posture was off. Stiff. Wrong. I hesitated before unlocking the main door, but not the storm door. Through the thin glass, I could see her more clearly now. She was an older woman, maybe in her 60s, with long, stringy gray hair. Her eyes were too wide, her lips stretched into a frozen smile. A perfectly still smile. And her hands were behind her back. That detail made me uneasy. I can't let you in," I said, my voice firmer now. Why was she hiding her hands? Her smile did not change. "Please," she said again. "I just need to call my son. My phone is dead. I promise it'll only take a second." Something about the way she said it made me feel sick. Her voice was too rehearsed, too precise. "There's a library 2 blocks down," I blurted, my mind scrambling for a way to end the conversation. "They'll have a phone." Even as I said it, I realized the library was closed at this hour, but I just needed her to leave. The woman's expression never changed. She just stood there, smiling, her hands still hidden behind her back. Then, in a voice that was disturbingly calm, she said, "That's very rude, to turn away an old lady asking for help." The words hit me like a knife. I swallowed, suddenly unable to move. Why did she say it like that? Like she wasn't sad or pleading, just stating a fact. The storm door was thin. If she wanted to, she could break through the glass. I forced myself to move, slowly closing the main door while whispering a quiet, "Sorry." She didn't protest. She didn't move at all. And that's what terrified me most. I stood there, heart pounding, listening. Silence. Had she left? I walked back toward my room, still shaken, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe she was just a confused old woman, lost, desperate for help. Maybe. Clink. I froze. Clink, clink. The sound came from my window. My bedroom window. The only room in the house with a light on. A sickening realization washed over me. She had moved. From the front porch to the side of the house. I stared at the window, blinds drawn shut. The sound continued, a rhythmic clinking, like metal tapping against glass. I reached for the light switch and turned it off. My room fell into darkness. Silence. Then, a shadow moved behind the blinds. I swallowed a scream and backed away from the window, my hands trembling. What the hell was happening? I needed to call someone, the police, my parents, anyone. But my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't think straight. Then suddenly, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. The doorbell rang frantically, over and over. She was back at the front door. But then, a second voice, a man's voice. "Hey, have you seen my mother?" I crept toward the peephole, dread curling in my stomach. There was a man on my porch now. He looked about 10 years younger than the woman, dressed in a ratty hoodie and jeans. "She has dementia," he explained, voice hurried. "She wandered off. I think she came here." I hesitated. If he was telling the truth, then had I just turned away a helpless old woman? But something was wrong. "She went around back," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I heard something near my window." The man nodded quickly. "Thanks. Can I come in for a second?" The way he asked it, too fast, too eager, my stomach dropped. "No," I said immediately. "You can check the backyard." He hesitated. Then after a second, he nodded again and walked down the driveway. I listened, waiting for the sound of footsteps in the grass. Nothing. My breath caught in my throat. I crept to the back window, lifting the blind just a sliver. The backyard was empty. The man was nowhere to be seen, and neither was the woman. A sudden, paralyzing realization hit me. They never intended to check the backyard, because they already knew she hadn't gone that way. Because they were lying, and they weren't really looking for a lost mother. They were trying to get inside. My hands were shaking. My breath felt too loud in the silence of my house. I stood frozen in place, staring out the back window, waiting, hoping to see something that would make sense of this. But the backyard was empty. The man who had been at my front door just moments ago had never walked around back. I had expected to see him searching for his mother, but instead I saw nothing. The woman was gone. The man was gone. But I knew they were still out there. The thought made my stomach churn. My gut instinct screamed at me that this was all a setup. That woman had stood at my door smiling that eerie, unnatural smile, hiding her hands behind her back. She had asked to come inside, twice. And when that didn't work, a second person appeared claiming to be her son. And when I told him she had gone into the backyard, he didn't even check. He just disappeared. I backed away from the window slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. The house suddenly felt too big, too empty. For the first time that night, I felt genuinely unsafe. I turned off every light in the house. If they were still out there, watching, I didn't want them to know where I was. I crept back into the living room, where I could see both the front door and the hallway leading to the back. If they tried anything, I'd hear them. I'd see them. The silence stretched on. Maybe they had given up. Maybe they were really just a confused woman and her worried son. Maybe I was overreacting. And then, in the silence, clink, clink, clink. A slow, deliberate tapping on the glass. My bedroom window. A fresh wave of pure terror rushed through me. They hadn't left. They were still here. I held my breath, listening. The tapping was too precise, too controlled. It wasn't random. It wasn't the wind. I could feel it in my bones. They wanted me to react. They were testing me, seeing if I'd panic. I stayed perfectly still, heart pounding, and listened. After a few moments, the tapping stopped. Then, the doorbell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then silence. And then, the doorknob twisted. I almost gasped out loud. They were trying to get in. I forced myself to move, creeping toward the front door on silent feet. The doorknob rattled again. Then, a soft knock. "I know you're in there." The voice was different this time. It was the man. It was no longer pretending to be polite, no longer pretending to be worried. Now it was low, flat, emotionless. "Open the door." I couldn't breathe. I knew, without a doubt, that if I opened the door, I wouldn't be walking away from this night alive. I backed away slowly, my legs weak beneath me. The knocking grew louder. "Open the door." I grabbed my house phone from the kitchen. No cell phone, no social life, no reason to have one back then. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I dialed 911. The ringing sound felt like it lasted forever. 911, what's your emergency? I pressed the phone against my ear, whispering, "There's someone trying to get into my house." The knocking stopped. The operator started asking me questions, my address, my name, but I barely heard them, because, in that moment, something happened that terrified me more than anything else. From just outside the front door, I heard footsteps, walking away, slow, deliberate. They were leaving, and then a voice. Not from the man, not from the woman, but from somewhere in the darkness outside. A third person, a third voice. Not this one. And then, silence. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. The kind of silence that changes you. The police arrived 15 minutes later. They found nothing. No footprints. No evidence of forced entry. Nothing. The officers told me I had done the right thing by not opening the door. They said I had been smart, lucky. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt hunted. I told my dad everything the next morning. He was furious. Not at me, but at the fact that someone had come to our house and tried to get inside. He installed cameras the next day. For the next few months, I was terrified to be home alone. Every time the doorbell rang, every time I heard a sound outside, my mind would go back to that night. To that smiling woman. To the man pretending to be her son. To the third voice in the darkness, the one who had whispered, "Not this one." It was only years later that I found out the truth. There had been a string of home invasions in nearby towns that year. The suspects were a group of 3 people. Their MO was the same every time. A woman would approach the door, asking for help. If the homeowner let her in, the other 2 would force their way inside. They wouldn't just rob the house, they hurt people. Badly. A few of their victims hadn't made it. I never told my parents that part. I never told them that, had I opened the door that night, I probably wouldn't be here to tell this story. But I remember that smile. And I remember the voice in the darkness, deciding my fate. Not this one. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Life moved on, but I never truly did. I never forgot the way that woman had smiled at me. I never forgot the way the man had spoken through the door, his voice flat, emotionless. And I would never, ever forget the third voice in the darkness. Not this one. Those words haunted me. It meant they had been choosing. It meant they had done this before. And it meant that, for some reason, some twisted, unknowable reason, they had decided to spare me. The police never found them. They never came back to my house, but I was never the same again. I developed new habits that I never had before. I double-checked every lock in the house, twice. I kept every light off when I was home alone. I stopped answering the door for anyone. And yet the paranoia never fully faded, because deep down I knew they were still out there. It had been almost a full year since that night. I was older, a little wiser, and I had finally started sleeping through the night again. Then one evening I was at my friend Cody's house watching his dog, Theo. That's when it happened. Theo started barking like crazy at the back door. At first I ignored it, but when I finally got up to check, I realized someone was trying to open the door. Through the screen I saw a man I didn't recognize, a man in his mid-50s, filthy, drunk-looking. He asked me if I had seen Melissa. Melissa was Cody's younger sister. She was in her 20s. There was no reason for a man like him to be looking for her. And yet, here he was. I told him to leave. I told him there were cameras everywhere. He hesitated, and then he left. But my blood ran cold, because it had happened again. Not the same people, not the same trick, but the same feeling. That feeling of being hunted, that feeling of something lurking in the dark, choosing its next victim. I don't know if what happened at Cody's house was connected to what happened to me a year earlier, but I do know this. There are people in this world who search for opportunities, people who wait in the shadows, watching, choosing, people who will knock on your door with a smile, pretending to need help. And the moment you open that door, that's when they strike. I don't answer the door anymore, not for anyone, because I learned something that night, something most people will never understand. Sometimes when the doorbell rings in the middle of the night, it's not a visitor, it's a test, and you better hope. They decide you're not the one they're looking for.